It was supposed to be one of the proudest days of my life. Instead, my mother leaned over during the graduation ceremony, while rows of parents stood applauding their children's names echoing through the auditorium, and whispered just loud enough for 2 rows to hear. "Well, I hope you didn't expect flowers. We already did all this for your sister." I froze. The applause still thundered around me. Students in navy gowns beamed as they walked the stage. Some wiped away tears. Others clutched their diplomas like it was gold. And I just sat there, motionless, staring at the spot where she'd just been sitting. She'd said it with a kind of performative exhaustion, like my achievement was just another errand she was annoyed to show up for. No card, no hug, not even a half-hearted smile. But what made it worse was that she had a bouquet for my sister, who was sitting 3 rows behind, not graduating, just attending. I remember my sister catching my eye and shrugging, like she was just as confused as I was. Then she turned back to scrolling her phone, completely unbothered. I hadn't invited many people. I didn't think anyone would really come. It was a late-in-life degree, community college, nothing flashy. But to me, it had meant everything, because it had cost me everything. And yet, they sat there, my mother, my father, and my sister, like they were doing me a favor. Then came the moment. The dean called my name. A pause. I rose from my seat slowly, hands trembling slightly. My heels clicked against the wood as I walked across the stage, and for a brief second, I allowed myself to smile. Until I glanced over. My father was looking at his watch. My mother was already digging through her purse. My sister had put her AirPods in. No claps, no cheers, not even a polite nod. The auditorium erupted for the next name, but in the tiny bubble around me, it was just silence. Humiliating, stifling silence. But the worst moment didn't come from them. It came right after the ceremony, when a young woman I didn't recognize approached me in the hallway. Maybe 22, long dark hair, kind eyes. She tilted her head and asked, "Sorry, was that your family back there?" I hesitated. "Yes," I said, voice barely audible. "They didn't clap or take photos," she said, her tone more gentle than judgmental. "I just thought, you were the valedictorian, weren't you?" I blinked. "How do you know?" She smiled softly and held up the program. My name was there, page 1. Her voice dropped just a little. "My mom cried when she heard your speech. She said it sounded like her story too. Single mom, GED at 42, kept going." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My chest was tight, my hands cold. The girl looked toward the parking lot, where my parents were already walking ahead without me. "Some people just don't know what they have," she said, then added quietly, "but don't let them write your story." Then she was gone, just like that. I stood there, holding a diploma in one hand, and nothing else. No celebration dinner, no flowers, no photo with my family, just the memory of that whispered insult and the ache in my throat from holding back everything I'd wanted to scream for years. And yet, something shifted, right then, in the echo of her words. Because for the first time in decades I realized, maybe I didn't need their applause. Maybe I'd been building something all along. Even they couldn't take from me. But I wasn't done, not yet. They thought this was the end of the story. They had no idea it was just the beginning. I didn't grow up resenting my sister. I need to start with that. People like to assume the jealousy came early, like it was baked into me, like I counted her gifts and birthdays. But I didn't. Not at first. I adored her. When she was born, I was already 9, old enough to change her diapers, old enough to rock her to sleep, old enough to start learning how to disappear. It began slowly, in the soft way favoritism always does. A smaller slice of cake here, a bigger allowance there, excuses whispered behind closed doors. She's younger. She's delicate. She needs more. At 13, I had my first part-time job, bagging groceries after school. My mom framed it as a mature girl's responsibility, while my sister danced ballet in new shoes I'd never be allowed to touch. At 15, I paid for my own braces. Not with savings. There were none. I worked weekends, holidays, every school break. When I came home tired, my dad would glance up from the couch and say, "That's what life's about, no shortcuts." By 16, I stopped asking for anything. It just made everyone uncomfortable. But even then, I still wanted to earn their pride. When my mom had gallbladder surgery, I was the one who changed her dressings, prepped soft meals, helped her to the bathroom at night. When Dad lost his job the year after, I quietly picked up more hours. I handed over half my paycheck without them asking. They called me strong, but never once did they say thank you. My sister got a car when she turned 18, a brand new one, red and sleek, with a bow on top like a commercial. I remember watching from the window, holding a dish towel, trying to smile when she screamed and jumped on Dad. I was 27 then, still living at home, working at a diner 6 days a week. I'd never had a birthday cake with my name on it since I was 12, but I was the practical one, the reliable one, the one who could wait. Only, the wait never ended. When my sister said she wanted to go to NYU, I helped her fill out the forms, proofread her essay, even typed her FAFSA. My parents didn't blink at the cost. "This is her shot," my mother told me. "Don't ruin it for her." So I did what I always did. I bent. I covered some of the household bills so they could put money toward her tuition. I picked up her part-time job while she moved out. When she called crying freshman year, homesick and overwhelmed, I drove 3 hours to bring her soup and sit with her. No one else did. No one even said I should. I still remember one Christmas. She had just finished her first semester, and my parents were over the moon. They gave her a designer bag, applauded her 3.4 GPA like it was a miracle. Then they turned to me, almost as an afterthought. "Well, you're always steady," Dad said, patting my arm. Like I was furniture, useful, sturdy, invisible. There were things I wanted too, college for one. But when I mentioned taking night classes, my father raised an eyebrow. "At your age?" he said. "You missed that train, kiddo." And so I swallowed it down. Again, I didn't take classes. I didn't buy new shoes. I didn't even fix the heater in my room one winter. I just bundled up and focused on keeping the household running. Because someone had to. That was the line they always fed me, that someone had to hold it all together. And somehow it was always me. Even when Mom got sick again, and my sister was traveling in Europe, it was me who sat in the ER, me who handled the bills, me who argued with the insurance companies. "You're just better at these things," they said. But what they meant was, I was the only one they could depend on, and the only one they didn't think deserved anything in return. It wasn't until years later, when my sister was living in a high-rise and my parents were talking about downsizing, that I learned something that stuck with me. The house we lived in, the one I cleaned and maintained and paid property tax on when Dad forgot, it was in my name, not out of generosity. But because years ago my parents needed my credit score to refinance, I was 23, had no debt, and blindly trusted them. I signed where they told me, and they never brought it up again. But that paperwork, I kept it, tucked inside a folder labeled medical receipts, hidden, forgotten, but not destroyed. And when I stood on that graduation stage years later, looking at the empty expressions in the crowd, I realized something with aching clarity. My life had been spent giving, quietly, steadily, faithfully, but I was done waiting to be seen. The tipping point wasn't loud. It wasn't a scream or a fight or a slammed door. It was my mother's voice, casual, cold, and cutting as ever, one Thursday afternoon in late spring. I was in the kitchen, still wearing scrubs from my part-time job at the clinic, stirring pasta because she'd said they were too tired to cook. My diploma hadn't even made it into a frame yet. It was still sitting in the envelope on my nightstand, unopened since the ceremony. Uncelebrated. That's when I heard it. She was on the phone with Aunt Marlene, her voice drifting through the hallway like smoke through a vent. "She's just stubborn, always was," she said. "Not like Ellie. Ellie's graceful. People like her. She's going places." There was a pause. Then the line that did it. "And honestly, if it weren't for us, she wouldn't have made it through school at all." I dropped the spoon. It clattered against the pot, sauce splattering across the counter like blood spatter in a bad crime scene. I stood there staring at it, hands trembling, not with shock, but with clarity, because that was the lie. The truth? I'd put myself through school, every class, every textbook, every night working 2 jobs while studying for tests with a thermos of coffee by my side. They didn't pay for tuition. They didn't buy my books. They didn't even ask how my classes were going. What they did do was this. They bought Ellie a condo. That came a week after my graduation. My parents called it a smart investment and said they wanted her to start adulthood the right way. I was still living in the same house I'd scrubbed and painted for years. My name on the deed, their name on the mailbox. And when I just asked, if I could finally move into the master bedroom since they'd officially announced they'd be moving in with Ellie for a while, my father looked at me like I'd asked to steal from them. "That's not how families work," he said flatly. "You're not entitled to anything." That word, entitled. It echoed through my ribs like a knock on an empty wall. And yet, they took what they wanted. My time, my money, my silence. They gave Ellie a down payment, furniture, and a spa weekend when she said law school was too stressful. They gave me lectures on gratitude. I remember the final dinner. We sat around the table, me, them, and Ellie, plates of takeout between us, because Mom didn't feel like cooking. She was flipping through her tablet, swiping house listings for Ellie to consider once the condo builds equity. Ellie laughed and said, "Maybe I'll rent it out and travel." And then, like it was nothing, she turned to me and said, "You'll be fine here, right? I mean, you like things simple?" Simple. That word hit like a slap. I'd kept things simple because I had no choice. Because no one ever offered me options, only duties, only obligations, only secondhand scraps of love passed down like tattered clothing. I was about to stand when Mom added, "And don't forget to mail the property tax by the 10th. We'll be busy with Ellie's move." My hands tightened around my glass. I said nothing, just nodded, but something inside me was shifting, slow, quiet, like tectonic plates beneath the surface. That night, I went into the garage, opened the fireproof box, and pulled out the file I hadn't touched in years. My name, my signature, the refinance paperwork, the mortgage, every single page in my hands. The house was mine. They had leaned on me for years, signed it over out of necessity, then pretended it never happened. But I never forgot. Not entirely. And now? I knew I couldn't pretend anymore either. Still, I didn't confront them. Not then. I waited. Let them box up their things. Let them move in with Ellie. Let them forget what I had built while they were too busy shining spotlights on her every breath. But the final straw came in the form of a voicemail. I was working late. It was past 10 p.m. My phone buzzed once, twice, then played the message. "Hey," my mom's voice said. "Ellie's looking into putting the house on the market. She said there's interest. Don't make it difficult." Just like that. Like it wasn't my home. Like I was some stubborn squatter clinging to what wasn't mine. I listened to that message 3 times. Then I walked to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened the diploma, still sealed in its mailer. My full name. Honors, certification. Then I reached for the folder of documents. If they wanted to play games, they were going to learn something that night. I may have kept quiet, but I had never been weak, and I was done playing the dutiful daughter. They had rewritten my story long enough. It was time I wrote my own, starting with the truth. They came back the following Sunday. Ellie led the way, wearing oversized sunglasses and that casual superiority she always carried like a handbag. My parents trailed behind, arms folded, lips tight. No one knocked. They just walked in. I was in the living room, knees tucked up, coffee gone cold beside me. I didn't even look up when I heard the front door open. I waited. "Okay," Ellie said brightly, like she was starting a team meeting. "So we need to talk about getting this place cleaned up before the listing. I found a real estate agent who—" I turned to face her. "Listing?" I asked. She blinked. "Yeah, Mom said you already knew. We're putting the house up before the market dips again." I stared at her like she was a stranger, because in that moment, she was. "Did anyone think to ask me?" I said quietly. My father chuckled, a dry, joyless sound. "You've had enough time here, we all agreed." We all agreed. Like I was just some tenant overstaying a favor. Only they'd made a mistake, a small one, a lazy one. They'd forgotten the one detail I had never let go of. The house wasn't theirs to list. So I stood, walked past them, calm, unshaken, into the dining room where I'd already laid everything out. Not just the refinance paperwork from 15 years ago, but the mortgage statements, the title transfer, the notarized deed with my name on the last line, all lined up like pieces on a chessboard, waiting. Ellie followed behind, phone still in hand. Is this... She trailed off as I turned to face all three of them. This house isn't yours, I said. Silence. No, I mean technically it's... My mother began, voice already climbing into that familiar register of disbelief. I cut her off with one finger raised. No. Not technically, not emotionally, not symbolically, not in any way that counts. I slid the deed across the table. You signed it over. You used my credit. You forgot I was even there. And now you don't get to pretend it's yours just because you're ready to cash in. For the first time in years, they didn't interrupt me. Didn't talk over me, didn't laugh. My father looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. Ellie's mouth was slightly open, as if waiting for a script to read from. But we lived here for years, my mom finally said, her voice suddenly soft. I nodded. You did, so did I. Except I also paid the taxes, the repairs, the water heater when it went, the roof last winter. You know what else I did? I reached for a single sheet of paper from the folder, my favorite one. I filed a quiet title action, last month. More silence. I had a lawyer verify the records, clean up the ownership on file, and reissue the title solely under my name. It's done. It's filed. It's mine. I let that settle, let the weight of it hang in the air like smoke before a storm. Then I picked up the envelope they'd left for me on the kitchen counter weeks ago. The one with a printout of Zillow comps and a post-it that read, "Be helpful for the agent." I held it up, smiled once, then dropped it, slowly, deliberately, into the trash can. They all watched it flutter down like an insult they didn't know how to return. Now, I said, with a finality that rang across the tile floor, you have 5 minutes to collect whatever you came with, and then you leave. You're kicking us out? My mother whispered. I'm asking you to walk out of a house that was never yours to sell, I said. That's not eviction, that's reality. Ellie looked like she wanted to protest. Instead, she grabbed her purse and stormed out without another word. My dad stared at me a beat longer, jaw tight, before muttering something under his breath and following. My mom lingered. I gave you everything, she said. I shook my head. No, you took everything, and pretended it was yours to give. Then I turned and walked away. But the twist wasn't the legal filing, not really. The twist came 2 weeks later, when I received a letter, a formal one, from the very community college I graduated from. Inside was an invitation. Apparently, the video of my valedictorian speech had gone semi-viral, shared by students, parents, even a few blogs that loved underdog stories. The school wanted me to return for the fall convocation as a guest speaker, and more than that, they wanted to offer me a part-time teaching fellowship. Life experience, they said. Real-world resilience. That's what our students need. I held the letter in shaking hands. I thought about the girl in the hallway, the one who told me not to let them write my story. I thought about my mother's silence, my father's disdain, my sister's vacant shrug, and I thought about the keys sitting in my palm now. Keys to a house, a name, and a life they once tried to sell out from under me. They had written me out of their narrative, but I'd rewritten the ending, one where I didn't beg for applause, one where I built my own stage and then stood on it alone. My parents never said a word after the graduation, not in the car, not back at their house, not even in the days that followed. It was as if pretending nothing had happened could make the truth disappear. But it didn't disappear, because the truth, finally, had a name. And that name was printed in bold letters across a university-issued letterhead, then embossed in gold on a scholarship announcement, and finally engraved into the etched plaque that the dean had personally handed to me in front of the entire faculty board as they stood to clap. Outstanding Graduate Achievement Award, Honors Valedictorian, Adult Learner Division. The look on my mother's face when she first saw it? She actually flinched. My father blinked hard, then set the paper down like it had burned his hands. I thought this was just some certificate program, he muttered. It wasn't, and they knew that now. The months that followed unraveled fast, and not in my direction, because the university had posted a photo of me and the dean online. Then a local paper picked it up. Then somehow an op-ed I'd written on persistence and second chances was picked up by a national site that ran stories on late-in-life education. My inbox exploded. My phone rang off the hook. I was invited to speak at an alumni event for adult students returning to school. My story made its way around the nonprofit where I worked part-time, and suddenly I was offered a full-time position with full benefits and a seat on the board's community advisory panel. People were proud of me, not because I was perfect, but because I'd kept going. And while I was being invited into new rooms, my parents were being quietly shut out of old ones. It started small. My sister, who had always been the golden child, tried to pitch a business idea at a family friend's investor dinner. But the moment she mentioned my name, as someone who inspired her, a woman across the table smiled and said, "Oh, I read about her last week. She's brilliant. I didn't know you were related." My sister went silent. She hadn't known the article existed. That night, she texted me, out of the blue, with a single line. "Why didn't you tell me?" I stared at the screen, not sure how to answer, because the real question was, why did I have to? Then came the nonprofit gala. I wasn't even going to go, but my new director insisted. So I put on a secondhand dress, touched up my makeup, and showed up. And right at the entrance, there they were, my parents. They had no idea I'd be there. My mother's smile froze when she saw me walk past the velvet rope, as the hostess greeted me by name and led me to a reserved table near the stage. My parents? They were seated near the back, under the speaker balcony. And then, during the program, something happened that I hadn't expected, not even a little. The MC stepped forward with a mic and said, "This year, we're proud to present our Trailblazer Award to someone who reminds us that it's never too late to rise, even when no one else believes you can." She paused and said my name. My heart stopped. I didn't even know I'd been nominated. The room burst into applause. Strangers stood, tables turned. Someone actually whistled. And as I walked to the stage, I passed by my parents' table. My father kept his eyes locked on his wine glass. My mother stared straight ahead, lips pursed. Neither clapped. But this time, I didn't care. I took the mic with both hands, smiled, let the room settle. Then I spoke. I want to thank those who stood by me when things were quiet, when I was invisible, when the effort didn't make headlines, because sometimes the hardest part isn't chasing a dream. It's believing in yourself when you've been taught not to. I paused, and to anyone in this room who's ever felt like they were too late, let me tell you something. You're not. If you're still breathing, you still matter. You still have time. The applause was deafening, and this time I let it in. After the event, people lined up to shake my hand. A little girl asked for a photo. A man in his 60s hugged me and whispered, "You said what I couldn't say at my own retirement party." But the moment that stays with me was when I stepped outside, heels clicking against the stone walkway, and saw my parents waiting by the curb. My mother looked at me, her expression unreadable. "We didn't know it was all this," she said quietly. I said nothing. My father cleared his throat. "You could have told us. We would have supported you." I almost laughed. "You mean like how you supported me when I graduated without applause? Or when you told me I didn't need a degree because it wasn't going to change anything?" They both stiffened. And then I said something that shocked even me. "I'm not angry anymore," I told them. "I just don't owe you any more explanations." And with that, I walked to my car. I didn't look back. They never apologized, but they didn't have to. Because that night, I didn't need their words to feel the weight of their silence. Their reputation, at least among the circle they cared about, had already shifted. People saw through the act now. They knew who showed up and who didn't. And while my parents returned to their quiet, respectable life, something had changed forever. I was no longer trying to be chosen. I had already chosen myself, and that choice, finally, was enough. There's a small window in my kitchen that catches the morning light just right. It doesn't face anything particularly beautiful, just a patch of grass, a crumbling fence, and a tree that's half dead on one side, but I've grown to love it. That little slice of view, the soft, honest glow. I sit there now most mornings with my coffee. No rushing, no hoping someone will notice. No need to prove I belong. It's peaceful. And for someone like me, who once begged for a seat at a table that never made room, peace is no small victory. I used to believe love had to come from certain people, in certain shapes. I thought it had to sound like my mother's approval, or look like my father's nod. I thought love was something you earned by shrinking, by giving until it hurt, and then giving a little more. But it's not. Love doesn't live in guilt or sacrifice. It lives in stillness, in being seen without needing to explain, in being valued when no one's watching. These days, I teach part-time at a local community college, adult education, mostly single moms, veterans, and folks who thought life had passed them by. And every time I watch one of them finally pass an exam they thought they'd fail, or write their first essay without second-guessing every word, I see a little bit of the old me. One of them, a woman named Linda, late 50s, returned after decades, once pulled me aside after class. Her eyes welled up as she said, "I didn't think I had the right to be here until I heard your story. It made me feel not crazy." That word, crazy, sat with me, because for years I'd used it on myself, for hoping, for trying, for caring too much. But we're not crazy. We're just not easy to erase. My parents still haven't reached out, not in the way people imagine they will. No heartfelt letter, no tearful apology, just the occasional card, a stiff phone call on holidays. But I don't ache for it anymore. I no longer need an ending where they change. Because the story changed me. I've created my own version of family now. It looks like Sunday dinners with friends who bring leftovers and laughter. It looks like my neighbor dropping off a fresh loaf of bread with a post-it note that says, "For the week ahead." It looks like students staying after class just to say, "Thanks for believing in me when I didn't." And maybe most of all, it looks like that little garden I planted out back. I started it the week after graduation, just a few herbs, basil, thyme, rosemary. I didn't expect them to grow. The soil was hard, the ground dry, my hands unsure. But I went out every morning anyway, watered them gently, talked to them like they mattered, and one day they bloomed, tiny, determined, fragrant, kind of like me. Sometimes people ask what I would say to my younger self if I could go back. Stand beside the girl who watched her sister get celebrated while she disappeared in plain sight. And I think I'd whisper, "They don't get to decide how your story ends. You do." So, to you, whoever you are, watching this, maybe sitting alone with a bruise on your heart that no one sees. If you've ever been the one who was left out, overlooked, called dramatic for wanting something simple like fairness. If you've ever been the one who clapped for everyone else, hoping maybe, just once, someone might clap for you. I hope you know this. You are not less just because they loved someone else louder. You are not unworthy just because they couldn't see your worth. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not invisible. You are growing, even in the dark. And one day, maybe sooner than you think, someone will say your name with pride, even if that someone is you. So go plant your little garden. Hang your degree where you can see it. Wear that dress you were saving for a better day. The better day is now. And if this story touched something in you, if it echoed something you've carried quietly for years, I hope you'll leave a comment. Just a small one, a me too, or a thank you, or even a name, because someone out there needs to know they're not the only one. And if you know someone who's still waiting for that moment to be seen, send this to them. Let them borrow this light until they find their own. And if this space feels safe to you, if these words helped in some small way, I hope you'll stay. Maybe even subscribe, not for me, but for the version of you who's still growing. Quietly, bravely, beautifully, just like that little patch of rosemary by my window. Still blooming, still here,